Something that all Godfather fans agree on is that we wanted more of Vito Corleone. His character was extremely fascinating and full of depth and complexity. We did get to experience watching a small sample of his rise, however, they didn't give us the full picture. That's why in this series of videos we are trying to bring you all the spectacular details and events that made Vito who he was, the powerful, charismatic, intelligent mafia don that managed to be both feared and loved. We analyzed every available detail that the creator of this impeccable world, Mario Puzo, has provided through his novels, in which we highly recommend exploring as they are full of amazing detail on this fascinating world and its characters. By the end of this video, you will have a much better understanding of how Vito became the Godfather. Vito returned to Sicily in 1922, after fleeing 21 years earlier. This time with him was his wife and children. He would be hosted by his partner in Sicily, who was his olive oil supplier, and then later developed a close friendship with Don Tomasino. They toured the Sicilian countryside, enjoyed the local culture, and then visited the town of Corleone. However, unbeknownst to anyone around him, Vito's intentions of coming back to Sicily weren't just for business or showing his kids their heritage. His intentions also included seeking revenge. He was secretly locating the men who were sent after him while he was escaping Sicily. After taking care of them, he then was after their leader. And so, Vito and his partner Tomasino set up a meeting with the aging Don Ciccio, under the pretense of obtaining his blessing for their olive oil business. When the now old and weak, nearly deaf Ciccio asked that Vito approach him, Vito looks at this once powerful mafia don, now a pathetic old man. He reveals his father's name and his birth name, then avenges his murdered family. As they retreat, Ciccio's guards open fire, hitting Tomasino, paralyzing him for life. Vito manages to get Tomasino and himself into their car and they escape. After having settled everything he sought to accomplish, Vito and his family soon after depart Sicily, returning to New York, satisfied. After the Olive Oil War, the Corleone family came out victorious and incorporated the former mighty Maranzano Empire, therefore becoming the single most powerful family in New York. Everything was going fairly well. His business was growing as well as his name and reputation as a man of respect. However, his eldest son was causing trouble at home. Sonny, who was just 16 at the time, had been caught in an attempted armed robbery with two of his friends where he was the ringleader. Sonny Corleone famously was the most impulsive and had the worst temper in the Corleone family. From his early teenage years, Sonny was known for having street fights, not doing well in school, and just overall being a bad kid. However, when Clemenza had informed Don Vito that Sonny had been involved in an armed robbery, it was one of the very few times Vito had lost his temper. He had sent for his son and berated him for risking his life for such pettiness. Sonny later convinced his father to allow him to join the family business and work under him. Vito saw this as inevitable, so agreed so that he can have Sonny learn from him and not emulate anyone else.
Did you pay attention?
Of course, Dad. What are you?
And so Sonny was now part of the family business, watching closely and learning from his father and his top men, learning the inner workings of a mafia family. Slowly everyone had grown used to having him around, doing small tasks, mainly watching how his father conducted himself. But Sonny's first real display of his skills as a leader were soon to come. While Vito relatively had everything under control, he knew in order to survive and prosper, there had to be peace. Constant battling between families was destructive and just bad for business. Not only within New York, but all over the country. There was a plethora of ambitious young gangsters rising, aspiring to carve a piece of the thriving criminal underworld, and so many of the already established bosses were looking to keep their rackets and businesses secure. Not only was there a threat from the aspiring gangsters and street hoodlums, but he saw that this strife in the streets between each other would be used to impose much stricter laws and crack down on their now extremely profitable operations, bringing unwanted attention that would be catastrophic. Being the visionary he was, even with his empire secure, Vito began his mission to bring peace among the crime families not only in New York, but all over the nation. He understood very well the risks of such an aspirational vision, but that didn't deter him. For the first year, he began meeting with various bosses and gang leaders, laying the groundwork of how he envisioned actually implementing his vision. He proposed to divide the city into spheres of influence, held by a small council, with the understanding of respecting set boundaries by all members. But the problem was there were too many conflicting sides and too many factions, all constantly fighting and all with conflicting interests, making it impossible to bring them together and come to an agreement. Therefore, Don Vito concluded that with the current number of groups with special interests, it would be impossible to bring order and peace until the number of factions was significantly reduced. There were 6 families that were too powerful to eliminate, but the rest were all small, independent groups and gangs that had to be eliminated. And so, he put all the resources at his disposal against them. It took 3 years for the total pacification of the New York area, but just before they reached that milestone, an incident occurred that almost ruined all that he had worked for. A small Irish gang that the Don had marked for extermination almost succeeded in actually taking out the Don himself. The assassin had shot the Don in his chest. Even though he was then riddled with bullets by Vito's men, the damage was already done. This unfortunate incident gave Sonny his chance. With his father out of action, Sonny took over a regime, holding the rank of 𝒂𝒕, and shocked everyone with his genius, strategic ability and merciless ruthlessness, which had been Don Corleone's only weakness. For 2 years, Sonny had built a reputation as being cunning and ferocious leader the underworld had yet come to know. He rivaled bosses with significant amounts of experience compared to him, and yet he still would come out on top. His sheer ruthlessness made them know that he truly was a force to be reckoned with, similar to his father. However, even Sonny was nowhere near the ferocity or heartlessness of Don Vito's top enforcer, 𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, who had hunted down the rest of the Irish crew and single-handedly wiped them all out. And when one of the major 6 families tried to interfere and utilize Don Vito's absence to take over, 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 took out their leader just as a warning. This just perfectly illustrates the Don's eye for potential talent and surrounding himself with the best possible people. He had structured his empire to still function fairly effectively even with his absence, which is a sign of a true leader. After Vito recovered from his wounds, he made peace with that particular family and continued working towards his vision. The true genius of Vito was his ability to not only keep an eye on his empire, but even everything outside of it. He foresaw the upcoming world conflict and knew how he could sway it to his advantage. But first, his world would need to be at peace if he was to make use of these upcoming events. And so, by 1939, he had finally negotiated an agreement with all the major families and bosses in the United States, from Los Angeles, San Francisco, Cleveland, Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, and Boston. He had finally achieved a working agreement amongst the most powerful underworld organizations in the country. Establishing a constitution-like agreement that respected the internal authority of each member in his state or city. The agreement would form what we now know as the Commission, and would be used to meet and settle affairs, to ensure they could hold the peace. And so, they all prospered from this deal, which actually turned out beneficial to all the parties involved and grew their power exponentially. They had literally organized crime. There is still so much more we need to share. The more we analyzed Vito, the more we found worthy of sharing with you, and so in part 3 will be the finale of this mini-series. We will finish off the rest of the vital events that had an impact on Vito, then we will go into his psychology and philosophy, his reasoning and thinking process that enabled him to reach the heights he spectacularly managed to conquer. In addition, we will uncover how Vito really viewed the world and himself. So stay tuned. And so once again, thank you for watching. We really appreciate your support.